Good evening. I'll call the meeting back to order. I'll ask the clerk for a roll call, please. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Hodges?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Roll Spurgeon?
Here.
Mr. Kleindienst?
Here. If you'll all please rise for the flag salute. Jeannie, if you'll lead us, please.
Please join me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight our invocation is by Reverend Devona Cox of the Retired Religious Sires. Devona, good evening. Thank you for coming down tonight.
Thank you for the privilege of being here. My husband and I retired from the Church of Religious Science. We've lived in Los Angeles, well, actually Hollywood, for 25 years. And we retired here 3 years ago, and this is as close as paradise as we've ever been. We love it.
Look no further.
Right. So will you join me in prayer? There's a power in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it for our good. It is within each one of us. It is called by many names. We call it God. Please know with me that this meeting is blessed as we speak. The business conducted here tonight is guided into right action for the citizens and residents of Palm Springs. We gratefully accept these blessings tonight and go forward with the assurance that all is well, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you. Tonight, under presentations, we have the swearing in of 2 new police officers. I'll call Chief Gary Jenner to the podium. And Chief, if you'll introduce the community to our newest officers, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I'd like to call up Officer Thomas Morrison and Officer Denise Judd.
So before the chief starts, what do you think? Do you like these already?
Yeah. Officer Morrison, we don't call him Tommy, by the way. It's Thomas. It was pointed out to me earlier. Thomas Morrison grew up in Palm Desert, in Indio area, and he worked as a optometrist for 13 years. And he began working for us as a police trainee in June of this year. He became a police officer upon his graduation from Palomar Academy on September 6th. Thomas and his wife, Kristen, have been married for 13 years, and they have 2 daughters, Zenedy, who is 4, and Jolie, who is 10 months. And they are out in the audience right there. He also has his parents-in-law, Georgia and Robert, and his mother, Carol Wilkins, is in the audience, and Sean, his cousin, and they're all right here. Hi, Sean. Denise Judd began her career in law enforcement as a dispatcher for us in 1997. In October of 2000, she became a community service officer. She wanted to become a police officer, and she met that goal upon her graduation from San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office on September 11th, 2003. Denise is married to a Palm Springs police officer, Bill Judd, and he's right back there. They have their children, Brent, who is 7, Madison 6, Shelby 4, going on 17, and Lauren 1, and they're all in the audience here tonight as well. Before I do the actual swearing in, I'd like to call up President Jim Francisco and the Executive Director of the 100 Club, Mike McCullough. They, as you know, the 100 Club does a service for police and fire, and what the 100 Club is a nonprofit, and they go out and collect money for the service of the police officers and provide bulletproof vests. So this is a presentation to our officers of a bulletproof vest by Mike McCullough and Jim Francisco. And Officer Morrison already has his vest on. He's ready to go. Okay. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I,
Thomas Morrison,
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, and I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. I present to you 2 brand new Palm Springs police officers.
Officer Judd and Officer Morrison, let me just say this, that you have entered the ranks of perhaps one of the finest law enforcement agencies in the state of California, if not the nation. You are surrounded by extremely talented, educated, intelligent professionals. You have a new family, and they go beyond those who share the uniform you wear. You have entered the family of Palm Springs. We honor and are respected by the work you do, and we welcome you to Palm Springs. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor.
Outstanding. I should like to turn to our city clerk, please, for a report on the posting of the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the agenda you have before you was posted in accordance with council procedures. You do have 2 yellow folders in front of you. One of the folders have items for item 12 that's concerning your public hearing and are a part of the record. The other folder has items concerning 7, 9, and 20. Those were additional materials for your review.
Okay, council, any questions on those items at your desk this evening? If not, we'll then turn to our city attorney for closed session report.
The Community Redevelopment Agency first conferenced on real property issues. Number 1, SWC Cherokee Drive and East Palm Canyon Drive. The council discussed this item, but no action was taken. Item number 2, NEC South Palm Canyon Drive and Mesquite Avenue. This item was also discussed and no action was taken. Item number 3, Heritage Community Housing, was not discussed. The City of Palm Springs also had conferences on real property issues. Item number 1, Vela Road and Mesquite Avenue. This item was not discussed. Item number 2, Calle Alvarado between Andreas Road and Amato Road, was discussed, but no action was taken. Item number 3, former Catherine Finchy School site. This item was discussed, but no action was taken. Regarding conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, item number 1, Center for Biological Diversity and the Sierra Club versus the City of Palm Springs et al., was not discussed. Under conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, item number 1, exposure to litigation, was not discussed, nor was item number 2, possible initiation of litigation. There was one added starter, which relates to the Palm Springs Modern Committee versus the City of Palm Springs. This matter was discussed, the council was updated, and no action was taken.
Very good, thank you, Tiffany. The Housing Authority, the Financing Authority, and the Industrial Development Authority have no business scheduled for tonight's meeting. We'll now adjourn as the City Council and convene as the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA. First order of business before the agency tonight is the approval of the minutes of the September 3rd meeting. Members of the agency, what's your pleasure?
So move.
Motion for approval by Ms. Rella Spurgeon and second by Mr. Mills. Any comments, questions, or clarifications at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Madam Clerk, it's deemed unanimous. There are no public hearings scheduled tonight. Anyone wishing to address the CRA during public comments, please come forward. I should remind you that there will be public comments for the City Council meeting following this very short meeting. and we'll call you at that time. Very good. Seeing no one, we'll close public comments. Members of the agency, first item before you is item A. It is the Heritage District Uptown Decorative Lighting Program. And I'll ask Mr. Reddy for his staff report, please. Mr. Reddy?
Thank you. Members of the agency, I would just like to note that by prior action, you had approved the infrastructure lighting for the Uptown Heritage District. What you have before you this evening, and what you have before you this evening is actually purchasing the lights. We're purchasing 15 lights at this first phase, and they will be by reimbursement agreement with the businesses there. Mr. Ogburn informs me that he already has 8 of the 15 spoken for, and then as these go, then we'll go on to a next phase with another purchase. We need to buy them now because there is a significant lead time to have them manufactured. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Members of the agency, further questions, comments, clarification?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Oden.
I will move the resolution.
Second?
Motion for approval by Mr. Oden and second by Ms. Reller Spurgeon. Any additional comments or questions?
Yes. There was a time when people used to say that the city of Palm Springs stopped at Alejo, and the Uptown Committee developed, and we've seen continued development in that area, and now we can barely see a line of demarcation between what was downtown and now what is uptown, and this mars that demarcation even more, so I'm glad to see it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Oden. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor? Chairman?
Aye. It's 5-0, deemed unanimous. We'll then adjourn as the CRA and reconvene as the City Council. Members of the council, first item on our agenda is public comments. I have 3 cards that have been handed to me by the clerk. I will call these 3 speakers, and then anyone else wishing to address the council, please come forward and form a line. First speaker is Mr. David Barron, followed by Mr. Harold Matzner, and then Mr. John Moore. Gentlemen, if you'll come forward, there's 3 minutes. We welcome your comments and good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of your Palm Springs International Film Festival, and the purpose of my coming here tonight is to congratulate the council on your continued support for the film festival. Without this council's support the last 12, 13 years, which has been unwavering and consistent, this film festival wouldn't have the kind of international acclaim that it exists today. So I wanted to thank the council for your support, for your foresight and activism in this regard, and congratulate you on that. I think that the festival is clearly the signature event for this town and brings to Palm Springs untold amount of publicity throughout the world. So we're really excited. The short film festival is going on now. We invite everybody to go and visit. I bought props for everybody. I've got short film festival hats for the council, and we didn't forget the staff, but we did underestimate the amount. So I'm going to give 5 hats to the city manager and let him figure out who gets them. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Mr. Matzner. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am also here to, on behalf of the Palm Springs International Film Festival, to thank the council for its support. Some wonderful things have happened to the festival in the past 3 years, and they would not have happened without the encouragement of this city's leadership. We, at this point, have managed to attract the executive director of the country's largest film festival, Darryl McDonald of Seattle, who will be our new executive director starting October 1st. And also Carl Spence, who is the director of programming of the second largest festival, which is San Francisco, and he formerly was the assistant executive director of Seattle. So we have top leadership. And I have to tell you, when I first spoke to Darryl McDonald 3 years ago and asked him if he might be willing to come here, there was silence on the phone and then some hysterical laughter. So we have come a long way. There's been a lot of hard work by a lot of good people, but those people could not have done it without the support of this community's leadership, and we thank you for your vision. And and for your confidence in us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Messner. Mr. John Moore, please. And that completes the cards before me. Anyone else wishing to address the council, please come forward. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm here to represent Moore Maintenance. We are privileged to have the opportunity to hopefully be approved for your janitorial services for the city. Several facilities here in the city. We currently service City of La Quinta, also the new Cal State building here, also the Palm Springs Mall, the river, for example. And we are proud to be able to come in at the lowest reasonable price to actually perform the work that's required per the contract. And actually, it's an honor to be here, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If you just come forward, give your name to the city clerk, and welcome. You'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Robert Morey. I represent the Stillman Group. I'm the CEO of that company. Tonight, I'd like to bring before the council the 3 projects we have in development and their status, just to have it on the record. The first one would be the Italian Music Festival. We have that in progress in another city. We hope to bring it here in October. We will be filing applications for the permits with the special events and subcommittee within the next 5 to 7 days, I would believe. It's fully funded. What we intend to do with that one is bring Italian music, both opera and classic folk, for a festival of 5 to 7 days in duration. It will also feature food, concessions, games. The food we will not bring will just be not the north and south regions, but the individual provinces, so it'll be very unique. We anticipate 3,000 to 5,000 people a day in attendance. We plan on charging $750 per person admission. We will be filing with the City Council a waiver of the zoning and probably for the sound as well. The second project we'd like to bring to you is the possibility of Indian Canyon parking structure being used for rooftop concerts. It's a very unique idea that was discussed with David Ocker, and it seems to be very promising. Once again, we'll be filing the permits for that subcommittee and asking once again for a zoning and sound exemption. The third one we have would be the spring concert sessions. A site needs to be found for that. The site we did have chosen is kind of tied up in a lease agreement right now. It's in development. It's just on hold. But we will be filing with that one once again within the next 30 to 60 days as it's funded. I thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to working with you here in the near future.
Thank you, sir. Could you leave a card, if possible, with the city clerk?
I can do that.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the council during public comments? Very good. Seeing no one, we'll close public comments. Council will turn to our consent calendar. We have 10 items on the consent calendar. Are there any issues you'd like to pull for specific vote, comments, or otherwise at this time? Otherwise, we'll take a motion on the entire consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mills.
I have an abstention on 10.
Yes, sir.
Warrant number 990704, business related.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Rilla Spurgeon.
I too have a need to abstain on an item number 10, warrant number 990968, family related.
Very good. Thank you. Any other abstentions this time? Any questions? Any needs for pulling items? Otherwise, what's the pleasure of the council?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion for approval by Ms. Rilla Spurgeon. Again, second by Mr. Mills. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call from the clerk, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. It's deemed unanimous, 5-0. Let's turn now to our public hearing. First item is item 11, case number 5.0970. This is a ZTA, Zone Text Amendment, for introduction and first reading, dealing with signs downtown and uptown. Mr. Reddy, I'll ask for your staff report, please.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I will ask Mr. Evans to give the report on this hearing. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Mr. Evans, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a zoning text amendment. It's the type of document that regulates land uses, property development, and in this case, it's focused on the city's sign ordinance. The zoning text amendment is to establish a procedure to allow live theater signs for historic theater projects in the community of Palm Springs. The proposed ordinance, as it was drafted, would only allow theater signs, and I'll describe the types of signs momentarily, in the existing Class 1 historic sites, be Desert Museum, Palm Canyon Theater, and Plaza Theater, Plaza Theater. As indicated, they're all Class 1 sites. They offer live theater performances, which is fairly unique to the downtown environment that we have here in Palm Springs. The existing code allows for reader boards and message boards, has size limitations, and the existing code also prohibits flashing, moving, blinking, or really media type signs. In this particular case, we've been working with the Plaza Theater to take a look at different types of sign opportunities. They would like to use creative media, which would be in conflict with the prohibited sign provision of the zoning ordinance, and there's no vehicle to grant an exemption to something that's outright prohibited. Therefore, we looked at how we might adjust the ordinance to create an opportunity. And what we've tried to do is create an opportunity where these three theaters could submit a unique sign program through a review process, and the approving body would have to make certain findings that the sign would fit the character of the building, would not diminish the historic nature of the building, and I'll go through them in detail momentarily. The idea was to try to create a process that would deal with this type of signage in those particular areas and yet protect the resources that the theaters actually operate out of. The proposed changes really are three. One is to put a provision in the prohibited sign category that basically says there's an exemption, see section such and such in the ordinance for these types of uses. So it's just a hook or a reference section, so it really isn't operative. The second one has to do with also providing a reference for live theater signs, basically talking about live theater, historic properties in the CBD and city-owned properties. There are no other properties that meet these criteria. We tried to craft an ordinance that was very strategically placed at live theaters, either in the CBD or on city-owned properties, and only those three really fit the criteria. So really that section only addresses in the CBD and other properties, and again, it's a linkage to the operative section, which is in your staff report on page 11B11, bottom of the page, live theater signs for historic properties. Basically, the findings that would have to be made: signs shall not alter the historic character of the structure, signs are visually creative, light sources shall be not excessively bright or obtrusive to passing vehicular traffic, pedestrians, or surrounding uses, and if sound is proposed, the sound shall not be audible by adjacent businesses or nearby residential properties. The last one has to do with the sign program would be subject to, as drafted, Planning Commission approval. The Planning Commission had a series of meetings. They had 2 public hearings on this proposed ordinance and 1 workshop. And after a lot of work as far as talking to the commission and explaining it to the commission, the Planning Commission unanimously denied the proposed change. They did not feel that it was appropriate. The findings of the commission are on page 2 of your staff report. I won't go through them in detail, but the commission was just uncomfortable with creating this type of sign ordinance amendment. Recognizing that, if the council considers and moves forward with this ordinance, my suggestion, the council might want to debate whether or not you want to adopt an ordinance that refers the sign applications back to the Planning Commission because they don't like the ordinance. It may just create a situation that the project starts with the commission, may not be approvable, creates an appeal. The council could consider changing the ordinance, creating really a unique section of the ordinance where these types of sign programs for only these 3 buildings go directly to council. It would be the only type of zoning permit that would come up to council first. Everything else starts either with staff, Planning Commission, and then a recommendation comes to council. That completes our report. Certainly try to answer any questions at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Council, this is a public hearing. Any questions on staff's report at this time? Very good. Seeing none, I just want to make one clarification in your staff report on page 11A. The second to the last paragraph refers to the Desert Museum Theater as Springs Theater. That would be the former Springs Theater of the Convention Center. I believe it should be referred to as the Annenberg Theater. If there's any ability to make concurrence in any other points during the report, I'd appreciate that. Okay? Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the council on case number 5.0970, zone text amendment dealing with the introduction and first reading of signs in the uptown and downtown area, please come forward at this time. Very good. Seeing no one, Madam Clerk, I'll close the hearing, showing no one wishing to testify. Council, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
I certainly see how this type of a sign can work for the facility that we've talked about. I think we've only seen this type of sign in the downtown one time. It's currently not there, but what I saw prior was certainly not what I'm talking about in approving this ordinance. That being at the plaza, not the content or not the exact, not the content, but just the way of the presentation. And I think what is outlined in the ordinance here, the process it needs to go through, and the terms that are explained that it needs to meet, I certainly concur with, but I would like to add one more term, and that's on 11B11, where it ends with E there. I'd just like to add an F. And would say that the size of the sign is to be oriented towards the pedestrian only. And I think the intent of the sign, I think, is to be, and then the one in the past has been. But I just think it's worthwhile to note that in the ordinance. I personally would not like to see this come straight to council as an approval item. I could see approving the ordinance at council and not taking it back to planning commission. But I think this sign, just like any other sign, should go through the normal process, architecture review, planning commission, and council if need be. So those are my comments.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mills. Other council comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Hodges.
Chris, I didn't exactly understand what you were adding.
Just an additional explanation that the sign be oriented towards, be a size that is oriented to viewing by a pedestrian. In other words, not a really big TV or whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, additional comments or questions? We've got just a couple of quick clarifications. On page 11B3, which is page 3 of your ordinance, about the third paragraph from the bottom, paragraph B, a logo may be incorporated. The bottom line references 1 1/2 square feet, but the numerical reference, I think, is a little excessive there. You got a run-on going there with the halves. And that same typo or otherwise error occurs on 11B7, paragraph E. Again, it says 1 1/2. I think we got too many halves in there. Okay? Here's my comments on this. This is, and I think people should understand this, this is a new path and a departure from our prior positions in prior years on this kind of signage. But I am encouraged by this, and I specifically appreciate the fact that there are 3 venues. This is not for one venue and one venue only. This is 3 venues. And this affords each of those who provide theater, live theater and otherwise, an opportunity to continue to promote the successes we have in all three of these areas, both in the Annenberg, in the Francis Stevens Park piece, and of course at the Follies, which is doing a remarkable job. So I think that the ordinance controls the quality, the tastefulness of it. I would concur with Mr. Mills' contention, though, that it should go through the approval process, not come back to us, that once the ordinance is set in place, let it go through the normal procedures of design, merit, and review. And I think that would provide the safeguards, I think, for the others who are concerned about this in the downtown. Some of the concerns that I've received in comment was that this is special treatment, and I think it may be special because this is dealing with live theater in our downtown. And we have tried for years to encourage that entertainment component, and this may be one of those ways in which we can facilitate greater usage of that sort of pattern in our downtown. Additional council comments at this time, please.
Yes. And I guess I just want some clarification. You're saying that if we approve it, then that it goes through a process again, through the planning and architecture review?
No, I'm not saying that the ordinance change is final here.
Yes.
Right.
But the process of submitting the sign would go through the normal means.
See, I'm a little uncomfortable with that because this is new, and there's no precedent for it. And I'm afraid that it may end up coming back to us again. And I guess I'd be a bit more encouraged if that process was more consistent. I mean, recently we have someone who went through 7 times just to determine the color of their building. And we want people to be able to function. So I'd hate to send this back and have it sitting there for months. And, you know, we have this downtown business that needs to function.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Ellis Spurgeon.
So, Mr. Reddy, I need to ask you, because is the Follies going to remain whole with this decision?
With the approval of what's before you?
Yes.
With overturning the planning commission?
Uh-huh.
It's my understanding that it will remain as it is,
As it is.
as a tenant.
The sign will move forward.
Are you talking about the monument sign or the TV sign? The TV sign, I presume. The TV sign is currently there, and I presume that's the one he will continue to use. How that would match the criteria of this ordinance that you're passing this evening, I would ask Mr. Evans to respond to that.
Mr. Evans?
If you adopt this ordinance tonight, once it goes into effect, Mr. Markowitz, as the applicant, would have to submit an application to the planning department for a sign program under this ordinance. It would go to design review and planning commission, and we would move it to design review on a Monday, the following Wednesday to the planning commission. So the commission makes a decision, and if there's an adverse decision, there could be an appeal filed to bring it up to council. That's the way the process would work if there was a concern. Obviously, if in the minutes, the Planning Commission was very concerned about the quality of design and the way the TV was displayed, and I think part of that was the fact that it was a traditional TV with a very deep body, and it stuck out the back of the sign. If there were a flat screen TV, that type of imagery, one, would be clearer and would probably be a stronger sign, may be more acceptable because it fits in the sign cabinet.
Okay, I got my answer, and the answer is no. And the direction that was given was that this was to move forward. That was the direction that was given. I understand what is being proposed tonight.
Mr. Ray? How about if we are to pass this tonight? I'm concerned about this going back to the Planning Commission, even if we pass this ordinance, because the Planning Commission is very much opposed to this. They are not going to approve it. I don't care what you say, they're not going to approve it. And I think it would be best, at least for the first one, to come up to the council and let the council look at the first one and look at what the yays and nays are on it. And let's see what the pros and cons are and see where we go from here. But I think it would be best if we at least allow the first one to come up to the council and not let it go to the planning commission.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Roden.
What would you think about the planning director making the decision and sending us the recommendation? He sat with both organizations. He's heard what they would like to see if it is approved, and you know all the guidelines within the ordinance that it would shorten the process.
I personally have difficulty with this because, and I told you last week what I want. I want to be assured that the Follies remains in downtown Palm Springs. That's what I want to be assured of. And that's not what has come back. And it will not get my support. I want the Follies.
Okay. I just need some clarification. If we approve it tonight, what the only contention is then the actual physical look of the display. And if you can work that out, that can be done by our next meeting, I would think.
I'm going to ask for clarification. What is before the council is a hearing on a zone text amendment. This is not relevant to one user. This is whether you wish to amend your zoning text. And a debate of a specific user over anyone else, I think, is not relevant to the agendized item. And I turn to city legal for that.
I address, Mr.
Please.
Mayor. Ms. Reller-Spurgeon, what the conversation you were calling from last week was about the lease with the Plaza Theater, which was different than this. Under the terms of the lease, he is entitled to use the sign that he has. That's different than the item that's now before you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Oden.
I think that the design of this particular sign is germane to this discussion because it's the only one currently. No one else is asking for this display, and it currently exists. So if we, and that piggybacking on what Ms. Reller-Spurgeon is saying, is that the timeliness of making sure that this is taken care of. So we don't want it to, to be something that drags on. So if we can have an approval by a recommendation that comes back to us next week through the Director of Planning after our vote tonight. The vote is one part. The second part is just the approval of the design. It's in 1 week.
Well, then I need clarification. The ordinance before us talks about a process of approval. Can you address that so we understand what we're approving here? Because we're not approving that it go through the planning department. Process is to go before the planning commission. Is that not correct? Mr. Evans?
The way the ordinance was drafted, and this ordinance was drafted a while back as far as establishing a process for approval, thinking that quite possibly this could have occurred prior to summer recess with the Planning Commission. The council is establishing the legislative context by which we will issue a permit. And the council could, in a range of decisions on how you might want to give us direction to craft the ordinance, as drafted, it goes back through the Planning Commission. It would only come to council on appeal. That has concerns of members of the council. You could state that the approval of this sign comes directly to council. And that way, all you get is a report, and you get to consider whether or not you approve it or not. Councilman Oden has said, set the ordinance up where the Director of Planning and Zoning would make a decision on the sign and a receive and file report to the council. We could craft that option, or we could craft one that city manager approves. I mean, we can craft it a number of different ways, but before we can issue a sign permit, we have to have an ordinance that permits that. And that's what we're looking at tonight, recognizing there's a concern about getting the decision on the actual sign done quickly, and we recognize that. But, we can craft the ordinance any way the council would like us to. And actually, the operative side of who approves, fairly simple in that item E. You just have to insert what body. Is it Planning Commission, council, staff? And we can work with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Fellow Spurgeon.
I need a 5-minute recess, please. I'd like to request one.
You want to convene a recess for the entire body or for yourself?
No, for the entire body. I need to talk to legal counsel, please.
We'll take a
Thank you.
5-minute recess. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We'll continue discussion on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Ellis Spurgeon.
I received the clarification that I needed so that I was sure knew how I was voting, or what I was voting on.
Is it something that we should also understand?
That I'm not as confused as I was.
All right. All right. So again, what's before us is a zone text amendment and introduction and first reading. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Now, is this going back to the planning director?
Well, I need to be referred to this paragraph E that talks about it. Give me a page reference, please, as to the process by which the approval would be.
11B11.
11B11.
Mr. Mayor,
11B11, what reference am I looking at?
very bottom.
Last sentence on the page.
Okay? All right, now that's how it reads. Is that to the satisfaction, or there is an amendment offered by the council at this time?
I'd like a little more conversation on the issue. I think, I would hate to think that this body all of a sudden is assuming responsibility for aesthetics along with everything else we do, except on an appeal basis. We have architectural review process, we have a planning commission, we have a system that's set up to handle that, and where these projects are reviewed by design professionals, of which, the council is not necessarily. And to bypass that organization, to me, is a slap in the face to those two bodies. And I having been on planning commission for a 10-year period and architectural review for at least that long, I fully believe that group, when the council has said that this is what we want, they will review it to that intent. And they will do a professional job of reviewing it, making sure that sign fits the requirements of the ordinance. There's not a doubt in my mind that they're going to say, there's not a doubt in my mind that they won't do that. They are not going to say, we didn't get our way, so the heck with you guys, and turn it down. I just don't see that happening. I have not seen that happening. And I think the process will move along as fast as it needs to, or as fast as it can, going this way. I would hate to put Mr. Evans, Mr. Reddy, or as was suggested, Mr. Busloff, in a spot to have to approve a sign along this line. It's not what I think of the process is all about, nor do I think it's fair to an individual to ask them to do that. So I'm perfectly happy with the way it's written, with the exception of the pedestrian size in nature. And Mr. Oden, I really don't see the process being slowed down, and I think it will result in a better sign, and I have all the faith in the world that Mr. Markowitz, everything he's done is always done well, and he will go to someone to help him do this, and I'm sure will do an excellent job. And if they meet with Mr. Ogburn ahead of time, if they meet with Mr. Evans ahead of time, there'll only be one submittal in my mind. It's just, I don't see the problem. So I would like to make a motion to approve the ordinance as written, with the exception of adding an item under 11B11, be it F or be it a new E and make EF, however you choose to set it up, that the size of the sign to be geared for pedestrian use only. And my verbiage may not be perfect, but you know what I'm headed towards.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. It's a motion. Is there a second? As drafted. I will second that motion. Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. No? Roll call. Let's see how we're going to do this. We're going to ask the clerk to read the text. Read the title.
Right, but first I'll need to take an action. Unless the council unanimously waives the reading of the full text, I have to read the full ordinance. So if you would like to take a vote on me just reading the title, that should be a separate vote. Otherwise, if you're not unanimous, then I need to read the full ordinance.
Wow. Council, will you allow the waiving of the text and the reading only of the ordinance title?
How long is it?
11 and a quarter pages. How much time do you have?
So I would need a motion for that, please.
Motion by Mr. Roden, second by Mr. Mills. All those in favor of reading title and waiving text, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Deemed unanimous. Madam Clerk, will you please read title waiving text?
Right, this would be an ordinance of the City of Palm Springs, California, amending the zoning ordinance in regard to creative live theater signs in the historic Central Business District Zone and city-owned historic properties.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
No. No.
Thank you. Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. Passes 4-0. Mr. Oden being dissenting. We now have our first reading and introduction. Let's go to item 12, which is an appeal for the Estrella Inn, 415 South Bellardo Road. This is a public hearing.
Wait a minute. What just happened? That was a 4-1 vote just on reading whether we want the ordinance read.
No, we took a voice vote on whether we want to waive text and read only title, and then we took action on the approval of the ordinance as it is currently drafted.
With Mr. Mills' amendment.
Amendment.
Is that not what you wished?
That's not what I wish, no.
And I'll ask for a motion to reconsider. And you are in the favoring party, so you can ask for that.
Mr. Mayor?
I'll second that.
Well, I need a motion, though.
I wish to reconsider that vote.
Motion to reconsider by Ms. Hodges and a second by Ms. Reller Spurgeon. Correct? For motion to reconsider. Now we're going to vote on the motion to reconsider the prior action. All those in favor of motion to reconsider, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to reconsider. So now, with that, council, let's be clear now. What we did look at was the approval as drafted with the amendment to change Mr. Mills's comment at the end on page 11B11, which was to gear the design of the sign for pedestrian use only. Okay?
Yes.
And some minor changes to the one-half, one-half.
Yes.
And changing the waiving of the reading of the
Right,
text?
right. Waiving reading of the entire text and only reading title. That was a prior motion, so that's still established.
Okay.
So now the question is it the council's pleasure to move the ordinance as it is drafted with one amendment offered by Mr. Mills? Correct? Do you need a second? You need another motion for approval and a second, or are we voting on that again? How do you want to proceed? I'll turn to legal and clerk for advice.
You can consider it now. You've had the vote to reconsider.
Vote to reconsider.
And you
So
can-
again, there's a
Okay.
motion on the floor, correct? Mr. Mills' motion to approve with the amendment.
Right.
My second still stands. Now, again, to clarify, that's what we're voting on now. Are we going to accept it as it is written with one change and amendment, which is to deal with the pedestrian scale of the sign?
So that's with it going to planning.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the process as illustrated in the original deck. Right.
Exactly.
All right, so again, waiving text, reading only title. Do you need to do that again for a second time?
No.
All right, then I'll ask for a roll call on that.
Ms. Hodges?
No.
Hold. Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Oden?
if we're reconsidering, then we can reconsider discussion as well.
By all means.
Well, that's why I said, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Oden?
I wanted to make a comment. In terms of the staff, our director of planning making this decision, that's why we pay him, and he does this all the time. He works with the architectural review, he works with the planning commission, and he makes those recommendations to us all the time. It really, the recommendation wasn't to actually get around dealing with the planning commission, but they just spoke on this issue, and I think sure they may choose, they will act in a professional manner. That isn't the issue. The fact is that saying that this is not our capacity to make that decision for the planning commission, with all due respect, far too often we act as the second or third planning commission or architectural review. So if it's coming to us in its unique manner for the first time, I think that's acceptable to do. This is the first time. There are some things that happen on a regular basis, certainly, but this is an exception. This is the first time we're doing something of this nature. And we were also dealing with this supposedly expeditiously. Now, we were trying to address this within a certain time frame. It's already gone beyond that time frame, and now even though that potentially may happen, I just hate to run that risk.
Mr. Oden. Mr. Reddy, that time frame has been met, has it not?
The time frame
For the one issue.
The time frame has been met insofar as Mr. Markowitz has signed the agreement portion of that equation. He signed the contract, the lease, so that part of the equation is complete.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mills.
I don't agree with what Mr. Oden just said. Mr. Evans does not make aesthetic decisions that come to this body all the time. He makes aesthetic decisions at where he's allowed to by the ordinance, but those are items that we very rarely see. I don't like putting staff in a position that I feel that is going to happen here, and that is to assume pressure from whatever point that is to where he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. The approval of this sign should, and it is just a sign, just like any other sign in this city, just requiring different restrictions. For this to be pulled out separately and treated separately, to me, it is favoritism and not equalizing the field for everybody in this city, particularly these three establishments. I think the precedent for the city council to be the first approval process on anything to do with aesthetics is a wrong step. It has been the wrong step in this city since 1972. And I personally find it extremely unacceptable, and I'll repeat, a slap in the face to the process. And as a planning commissioner, as I mentioned, architecture review, this it's as if saying that you can't do your job. And Mr. Mayor, as a question to the clerk, this is first reading, is that correct, Trish?
Introduction to first reading, yes.
Yes.
And then when is the second reading?
Typically, I bring it back at your next regular meeting.
So in 2 weeks? Mm-hmm. My understanding is there's no action could be taken on this until after the second reading anyway. Is that correct?
An ordinance takes effect unless otherwise stated 30 days after the adoption.
Okay, so the second reading and then 30 days after that, right?
That is correct.
No matter what. So this applicant has 30 days plus 2 weeks to get his application in. His application could be in and have gone through the process and be completely ready to be approved formally by the time on the next day after the ordinance is adopted. So I don't see that we're holding anything up. There's ample time for this to happen. And I know the enthusiasm that Mr. Evans and Mr. Ogburn both have for this project. I believe fully that them working with the sign designer will come up with something that will be approved on the first pass.
Okay. Additional comments? One aspect of what I deal with in my decision-making is I try to avoid what we call selective enforcement or special privilege, or as Mr. Mills referred to it as favoritism. What I'm looking at on tonight's agenda is to amend the zoning ordinance to allow this kind of signage that does not exist currently in Palm Springs. The process is seemingly very standard from my standpoint. We're modifying our belief that signage for live theater in the downtown and the uptown would be permitted under these following conditions. Standardly, it always would go before the Planning Commission. As Mr. Mills indicates, the timeline for the way in which a ZTA occurs affords 6 weeks waiting period anyway. You cannot make a decision tonight. You're not afforded that by the agenda. It's not on the agenda to permit or grant a specific sign. You are simply modifying our ordinance. So if you wish to move this forward, the best way to do so is to amend your ordinance that then permits, if not facilitates, this kind of a use, because currently it's not permitted. And if you say, well, it is permitted, then it does become selective enforcement. And I don't think this council is known for selectively picking those who are enforced and those who are not. We are looking at changing and making things more compatible, more updated and otherwise, but the most expeditious way to move this is to move the ordinance, or you bring it forward for a specific action, for a specific use, for a specific location, and bring it back for specific selective enforcement, if not modification, towards a single user. And that is not what's before you tonight. It's not there. There is a role in the staff in this process, and there is a role in the Planning Commission in the process. And it's not a new one we're establishing. It is what is precedented by over 30 years of practice, not just here, but in the great state of California. So I suggest to you what's before you is a pretty standard modification to an ordinance that allows for an exceptional kind of sign for an exceptional kind of usage. Mr. Roden.
Yes. These are our buildings, are they not?
Two of them are.
Okay. Both historic buildings. So it's not selective enforcement that we're going out into the community. These are our properties that are historic, that can only be used for in the purposes that they currently exist. So we're saying that we want to do what will help us with our properties so that they can be successful, no matter who's in there. Has nothing to do with who happens to be in the building. They're our properties. And either we're going to establish them in such a way that they can be successful for their current uses, or they aren't.
No, I would take even more exception if its selective enforcement is to grant us greater privileges than those we serve. I mean, we still are argued by people that the air conditioning units on our very own building here in a historic building at City Hall are on the roof without shielding, because we waived that. We're allowed to do that. And again, we tell people they can't, but somehow we can. And I've always been very uncomfortable with the selective enforcement as the leaders of the community saying, it's good for you, but it's not for us. And I think that's even worse in the selective enforcement area. So we could debate this further, but I think the debate is pretty much exhausted. What you have before you is a motion and a second to approve the ordinance as drafted with a single amendment by Mr. Mills and a simple grammar check on a couple of numerical references. And at this point, I'm going to call for the roll, please.
Ms. Hodges?
No.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
No.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye, it's 3-2. We have a zone text amendment approved for intro and first reading. Now we'll turn to item 12. This is an appeal for the Estrella Inn, again, 415 South Bellardo Road. Mr. Reddy, I'll ask for your staff report. Again, this is a public hearing. We'll get staff report, and then we'll open up for questions, and then the community can come forward and give comment. Mr. Reddy.
Thank you. This is the Estrella Inn. It was the remodel, and it comes to you on appeal, and Mr. Evans will give the details of the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is an item that is part of a series of actions by the Planning Commission regarding the Estrella Inn. The appeal is by a group of homeowners in the neighborhood. They're appealing the requirements for site improvements that the Planning Commission approved, particularly curb and gutter, sidewalks, and connecting pavement, and reconsideration of the Commission's denial of a request to install basically 45-degree angle parking on Bellardo Road. It's a little bit easier to follow when I get up to the plan, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the details of the staff report because you have to understand it. I think, you know, this is a classic situation of creating appropriate edges and conditions as we transition from one type of development or one element of a neighborhood to another element of a neighborhood. The homeowners that filed the appeal went through the city's general plan very carefully and picked out all of the policies that they felt supported their appeal. None of them specifically say exactly what the improvements need to be, because a general plan doesn't go to that level of detail. That usually is city standard plans or zoning ordinance requirements. The Planning Commission also looked at this project in the same context. They looked at the physical improvements that are existing, the physical improvements that were proposed, the staff recommendation that came from engineering and planning. They looked at the city policies that say, yes, we can create unique situations and edges, and we've been doing it for years. In this case, I don't think there was agreement. The Planning Commission made a recommendation. It was not consistent with what the property owner had proposed, and it clearly, because of the appeal, was not consistent with what the appellants felt was appropriate. So with that kind of broad background, because you have a very lengthy report, let me explain the plans, and hopefully you can understand physically what we're talking about, and then ask questions, because as the Planning Commission found out, this one went on for quite some time. The Commission had workshops, Design Review looked at it, felt one way one meeting, reconsidered it at their next meeting. So we've had quite a bit of discussion on this particular item. And what I'd like to do is really focus on the Planning Commission action. And then if you'd like to know what the applicant originally proposed, I can show you that also. But if I show you all the drawings and all the iterations that the commission looked at, I have a feeling I'm going to explain the plans multiple times, because that's what happened at the Planning Commission. The proposal again had to do with South Bellardo Road and Cahuilla Road at the Estrella Inn. The Estrella Inn is one of our very, very finest small inns in town. They've been doing an extensive renovation. They started with a conditional use permit and a day spa permit that was approved by the Planning Commission. It was controversial with parking. We worked those issues out, I think, to the satisfaction of the neighborhood as well as Estrella Inn. Then the next issue was parking and street improvements. You know, how to make that work and fit. And that's the subject of the appeal. The easiest part of the proposal to describe is South Bellardo Road. The Planning Commission approved this diagram. Basically, in front of this portion of the hotel, with north being to the right, basically putting in a standard curb and gutter, a standard sidewalk, and then the parking would be parallel adjacent to the curb, just like it is in most places on Bellardo. Originally, the applicant proposed to just leave it alone, where people actually park up on the asphalt berm up right next to the building. The second proposal from the applicant was to have angle parking along this section of Bellardo only. The Planning Commission looked at that and said to have one small portion of a roadway that's a collector roadway, that's really the break line between the hotel district and the commercial district, having that angle parking would not work in one block, not appropriate. So the commission basically said, put a sidewalk in, have the parking adjacent. The reason this drops back was when this portion of the hotel was approved years ago, one of the engineering requirements was to widen the street out to the ultimate. And if you look at that, while it works really well as a drop-off, it's kind of an anomaly in the street alignment of that street. If you'd like to see the diagonal parking plan, I'll show that to you, but I don't want to go back and forth between exhibits yet. Excuse me. On Cahuilla Road, again, south being here, north being here, this is approximately 400 feet of frontage. You have an interesting situation. Existing, you have an edge of pavement roughly out in here. And then when you get to, again, this section of the property, the bay parking is pulled back from the edge of pavement to the ultimate street improvement line for a collector roadway. And you have traditional bay parking in this area. So again, edge of pavement, roughly up in here, right-of-way line is back in this area, and this is existing. So what the applicant proposed for new bay parking was to come in and match up with that. And that nobody's really had a concern about that I'm aware of. Match it up there, match it up here. So from this portion of the project to here, the bay parking is back where it would be outside of the traditional and required right-of-way width of a collector roadway, which is 30 feet. When you get to this end of the project, instead of moving the curb back and putting in traditional sidewalks, what the Planning Commission basically said, and what Design Review was comfortable with, was let's make this a very nice landscape edge. Let's put the sidewalk probably behind the landscaping. We'll have a transition issue as you get down into this area. Have a flat curb section, so it would not be a standard 6-inch curb. It would be about a 1-inch curb lip. So it would have a soft edge, not a barrier curb edge. So people would know where to park here. Drop it back through here, and this area would have to be asphalted. And the commission said there's no room to come in front of the parking, existing or proposed, with a sidewalk. Take a decorative sidewalk and run it so there's at least a place where people can see where you would walk behind the cars. Otherwise, if you took and build it where you normally do, you have a real substantial problem with putting that sidewalk behind the parking spaces. From the standpoint of how that works, again, you would have a concrete sidewalk. It would be a colored concrete running here and through these landscape areas, again, pushing the landscape out to edge of pavement with a flat curb section. What the appellants would like on this side is that any walkway be decomposed granite, be a soft, rural feel. And I believe not only in the sidewalk areas, but also behind the parking spaces. So you'd have a decomposed condition behind the parking spaces, so to enter or exit, you would drive across, a decomposed granite material. The Planning Commission looked at that and considered that and just felt that the material would not hold up. It can't be compacted to the level. It's not going to hold up. You're going to have a track out problem of the dirt. Decomposed granite ultimately gets ground into dirt, onto the street. You get it up on the bay parking, and that decomposed granite behind the parking spaces would just cause a problem. The Planning Commission, after lengthy discussion, basically said decorative concrete sidewalk, basically run a band along here, do a landscape program so that we have something that is a different condition. It's not standard. It's not the traditional 8-foot sidewalk right behind the curb, natural concrete. And if the landscape were done right, with a little bit of effort, really the sidewalk wouldn't be that visible from the street, but it would give people a path of travel along the frontage. From the standpoint of type of material, whether it be natural concrete or decorative concrete, very stable, very safe material. The concern that planning and engineering staff expressed to the Planning Commission that if you do decompose granite walkways on private property and you compact them, fine. In fact, we've done that on a commercial project in town. Works really well as long as it hasn't rained a lot. And you have a path of travel that would work, but anytime you have a decomposed granite path, even if you compact it on public property, you have all the traditional risks associated with what happens in the public right-of-way. It's slippery, may not perfectly be even, may require a different level of maintenance, and probably doesn't meet, it won't meet the technical criteria for ADA access. We met with engineering staff and our ADA coordinator today, and there's a concern that in the public right-of-way for a public sidewalk, it really doesn't meet those criteria. The council, options could be, in this, you can always uphold the Planning Commission's decision. You can modify the Planning Commission's decision. You can overrule the Planning Commission's decision. The first point is diagonal parking here. Second point is the type of sidewalk, whether it be the appellant's request for decomposed granite, a decorative sidewalk, and if you wanted to talk about different materials that would be upgraded beyond concrete, be a little bit safer, you have a range of materials that you could put in that would meet the criteria that the city normally looks for. You could do decorative pavers, you could do bricks, you could do flagstone, you could ask them to come up with an exposed aggregate and maybe a flagstone edge, special sidewalk. There's a number of different ways to do that to meet the traditional engineering requirements. If you can also approve a decomposed granite condition. So the council has a range of options, and because this one has so many different iterations, we did not try to predict council action tonight as sometimes we're known to do. You would have to give us direction so we could prepare a resolution and revised conditions of approval for council consideration based upon the direction you give us after the public hearing as far as council's direction on how to handle this. So I hope I went through the issues and I tried to be as focused as I could and not go back and forth. I have 3 more panels of exhibits if you'd like to see the different iterations of this.
Doug, before you leave the exhibit, council, any questions on the staff report or the exhibit on the wall?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mills.
Mr. Evans, in the appeal, I understand that they're requesting the DG behind the bay parking. That's a raw edge of asphalt right now on the street. Are they suggesting any hard edge to that asphalt or a permanent edge versus just as it is now?
Well, we might, the appellants are here, so during the hearing they can explain their exact request. I mean, it was my understanding that we'd probably come in and do some asphalt and limit the amount of decomposed granite behind. In theory, you could come in and clean up the edge, put a mow strip in, do all this in decomposed granite, let the bay parking go in as decorative paving and have that type of condition. I mean, there's a number of different ways you could do it. You could waive all the street improvements and just, require a covenant that when and if we ever do anything, we'll do it, but at that point you'd end up with a rough edge of pavement that's going to fail on the edges over time. Those were the length of discussions we had back and forth with the commission before they made their decision to make the recommendation that they did.
And Doug, what's the half street there?
The half street is a 30-foot right-of-way, and the curb would be at 20.
Okay. Thank you.
Doug, on the exhibit, would you, the big green circles indicate trees. Are those all existing trees, proposed trees, or combinations thereof? Especially along the street side on the west, please.
Those are proposed.
Those are all proposed, so there
Yes.
is no landscaping in place now to that degree?
Correct. All the colored improvements relative to the trees would be new, and the idea is to come in with a tree form that would give a nice soft edge. And we went through, I don't think anybody was concerned about the tree materials. I'd have to look at another exhibit to recall which one it is.
All right, and from the property line to the edge of pavement, roughly how long is that distance? About 10 feet? Looks like it's almost the width of a bay parking on the west. This piece right in here.
Right, that's what I'm going to look up.
Thank you.
Would be approximately 10 feet. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Council, any additional questions? Comments?
13 feet.
13 feet?
Yeah. From exit.
13 from edge of pavement to property line.
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you, sir. Any additional comments or questions? This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the appeal, item number 12, which is the Estrella Inn, 415 South Ballardo, please come forward. I have one card. I believe it's Mr. James Jess. Is that correct? Yes. Is that right, sir? If you'll come forward. This is a public hearing. In a public hearing, each of you has up to 5 minutes. The clock is in front of myself, and I believe in front of Ms. Rella Spurgeon. The clock does count down from 5 minutes. If you'll pull the microphone close, we'll all be able to hear your comments, and we welcome them. And anyone else wishing to address the council during this item, please come, form a line, a queue, and we'll move through it more rapidly. Mr. Jess, good evening.
Good evening, council. Thank you for hearing me. In Mr. Evans's presentation, he used the term, if it were done right, and that's, in our English language, the subjunctive mood, condition contrary to fact. There is in our neighborhood a remarkable unanimity of the commercial and residential interests as to the development we wish to have. And this is a very unique area. And I don't, want the area in which I chose to live 20 years ago to remain some rural area where cows are walking back and forth. But there is a unique character to this particular area, and it has to be addressed in terms of the improvements that we make. I think it's a misnomer in Appeal Estrella Inn, Ballardo Road, to refer to these as site improvements. Not everything is an improvement. And while there may be practical and engineering considerations that have to be addressed, I'm sure those that follow me will have a response to alternative techniques that may be used. But we who live in the area and the inns who do business in the area are pretty much interested in keeping the area as it is, with the unique, charming character that draws tourists and visitors here. Now, they don't vote and they don't appear before city council, but we do, and we're interested in preserving the quality of life that we have here. I addressed the council once before, and I said this is not a truck stop in the Mojave Desert where everything is an improvement. So I want to respectfully call to your attention the fact that there are alternatives to the proposal that the commission has suggested. Now, generally, we do not feel, and when I say we, I just don't mean the residents. That's not an appropriate term. These are the commercial interests, the people that own the inns. We're all pretty much cozy and together there. And we don't think that the decision in this instance reflects the interests of the residents, the policies articulated by our elected council, or the master plan for the area. Now, there are alternatives, and I would respectfully submit to the council that this be reconsidered and alternatives other than if it were done right be considered by the council before jumping into this. It seems kind of silly because there are people that are against all progress, that don't want anything. Now, we realize that there are improvements that have to be made, But the unique character of this area lends itself to something a little bit subtler than the ordinary curbs that we're going to see in Newport Beach. So I would respectfully submit to your consideration a rejection of the Commission's decision in this, which I believe was inordinately influenced by the Planning Department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Hamlin. I'm a resident of the Tennis Club area, and I'm going to speak about Cahuilla Street, and I can surely address the questions that several of you brought up tonight, and I want to make some comments on some of the points Mr. Evans made, and I also want to address some of the legal points which were in Mr. Evans' report. First of all, let me talk about the decomposed granite solution. The technology exists to solve this problem. We're not going to sprinkle rocks out there that people are going to trip over. New technology exists that allows you to take natural materials, grind it up into different sized rocks, and powder is formed. Then a proprietary formula, a powder, is mixed with it. It's called a stabilizer. Then water is mixed with that. It's cured, just like concrete. So this whole area can not only be ADA compliant, it can be stable, it will have drainage, but it will be beautiful, and it will look just like we want in a historic district. This solution, as I showed in my report that I left with you, is in use all over the world. It's in use in Central Park and Battery Park for sidewalks and maintenance roads. It's in use all over Paul Revere's Ride. It's in use in the boulders for streets and driveways. And in our own backyard in Orange County, they're building park places for tourists and buses right by the beaches. And I have a picture of that, which I want to pass along, because it's high desert coastal area, and they had the wisdom to see that the stabilized, decomposed granite solution would indeed preserve the beauty of this high desert coastal area, but yet fulfill the needs of a public space, which is what we have here. This proposal, by the way, was suggested to a certain degree by the Design Review Committee, which Mr. Evans did not mention in his report. So there was a contrary decision. The Design Review Committee did recommend a decision that was would placate the neighborhood, and that was rejected by the Planning Commission. Second of all, I'd like to address the laws, which he mentioned in his report. He mentioned the general plan. The general plan specifically prescribes the planning department to use different practices for historic districts. You heard Mr. Evans in his report tonight say that we got a standard solution. We got standard 6-inch concrete and curbs from the planning department in a historic district. We heard that in the report. Second of all, the municipal code directs the planning department to read the general plan before writing the specification for the conditional use report. That obviously wasn't done because we got a standard solution. So I'm requesting you to reject the Planning Commission's recommendation of June 25th in favor of a natural solution, which was already recommended by the Design Review Committee for a historic district, because this issue will occur not once but many times, because we have many historic districts in Palm Springs who will have the same problem. This is a new technology that should be in the repertoire of our planning department. Thanks. And here's the picture, which I do hope you read and look tonight. Pass this around. This is Orange County.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is James Jackson. I'm speaking on behalf of the ownership of the Estrella Inn. Nearly a year ago, the Planning Commission, as we were undertaking the conditional use permit process, asked us to meet with the neighbors and begin to discuss their concerns vis-a-vis our property and its ongoing development. Over the course of that year, I think we found a remarkable consonance between our vision and our neighbors' vision for the neighborhood, and as well, we've shared a commitment to quality design. There are two main points I'd like to make about the staff report and our property. The first is that We sit on the boundary of two zones. One is the commercial district to the east, represented by the backs of businesses along Palm Canyon. It's primarily parking lots, service areas, etc. To the west is a neighborhood composed almost entirely of single-family residents, some of the older homes in Palm Springs. On the Bellardo side of our property, we are mostly in agreement that curbs and sidewalks are appropriate. The width has been discussed with the Planning Commission. I believe we're all pretty much on the same page. It's really on the western part of our property along Kauai where there seems to be cause for dispute right now. The second part that I'd like to address in the Planning Commission report is I believe it's called a windshield survey of the neighborhood. They cite the percentage of curbs and sidewalks in that neighborhood on Kauai. There are two very, very distinct neighborhoods to the west of our property. To the north of Bellardo is a neighborhood that has extensive multifamily residences and a large number of small hotels, as well as single-family homes. But to the south of Baristo, where we are, is almost exclusively single-family homes. And this is the neighborhood and the conditions we've tried to address in our design. That area is almost bereft of sidewalks and curbs and represents the style that we're trying to propose. In our proposal for Kauai, we do believe that the street edge needs to be protected somehow. The city has proposed what they're calling a flat curb with a small jump. A mow strip would suffice. It will protect the concrete street edge. It will help promote flow of water in heavy rains. It will define the edge of the landscape, and it defines the edge of the road for drivers visually. We don't take issue with that. The real concern for us is what the walk surface and what the hard surface for parking and driving is. And we support the neighbor's vision of a softer surface there, such as decomposed granite. It's more consistent with the existing neighborhood, the rural vision, and the design that we're trying to put forward, at least on that side of the property, that's consistent with the neighborhood. So we support the neighbors in asking you to take a second look at the Planning Commission's vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
My name is Alyssa Goforth. I live at 175 South Kauai. I am the resident manager of Casa Cody. Been here many times. I'm here to support the appeal of the Historic Tennis Club Association and the Historic Tennis Club Neighborhood Organization regarding the sidewalks and curbs in our neighborhood specifically. The current soft edge landscaping of the majority of our neighborhood, including the ends, adds to the ambiance and enhances the charms of the tennis club neighborhood. The resurgence of tourism and growth in Palm Springs over the last 10 years is due in great part to the restoration of this particular area. Both the restored homes, which have brought up property values, and some 20 small inns in this 5-block radius. As the organizer of the Christmas Walk of the Inns, which incidentally, December 11th is the 8th year, I can't believe it, I hear compliments and comments daily, year-round, from people who have come to visit, expressing appreciation for those who have maintained the integrity of the historic parts of Palm Springs. A decision of this particular type to put in curbs and gutters and concrete for the Estrella or for wherever may next spread to encompass other areas such as the Movie Colony and Old Las Palmas, both with lovely rural softscape landscaping. Perhaps it's time we took another look at the landscape of our internationally known Smoke Tree Ranch. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the council on this item? Very good. This is a public hearing. Madam Clerk, I'll close the hearing. And council will turn to you for questions or comments.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Oden.
I think this is a classic example of how diverse our community is, and that a cookie cutter or what's good for one is good for all approach will not work. To the Estrella Inn and their administration, I just want to say thank you for your willingness to cooperate with the neighborhood. Often we find that development is in opposition to the neighborhood, so I think this is a very good thing, and I'm glad to see it. I think that the recommendations from the neighborhood their concerns are worthwhile taking a look at. I think that the goal is to preserve their neighborhoods, and if this is one of the ways, based upon these recommendations, that we can do it, then I think that we should. Perhaps with the parking, because there was a recommendation that initially they wanted the diagonal, but they were okay with going with the parallel. I mean it's parallel. Yes.
The property owner representative has indicated they're comfortable with the parallel parking. The appellant's letter still has indicated they would prefer the diagonal, and they did express concern about vertical curb. The only place in the Planning Commission recommendation that there's vertical curb is along Bellardo, adjacent to that parallel parking, where it does start to match up with existing improvements. So, Bellardo, the appellants would like the diagonal, the Estrella would like the parallel, and the Planning Commission recommended the parallel.
The Planning Commission recommended the parallel as well?
Yes, sir. That's only on Bellardo Road, and then the issue on Cahuilla, the Planning Commission does not recommend any vertical curb. There's no vertical curb on Cahuilla. It's basically a 1-inch flat curb section, so it's like a driveway approach bump, so that there's just a differentiation between asphalt and the curb, and then the landscaping or some additional improvements.
Okay.
So that clearly doesn't follow our city standard plans to have a flat curb section like that, or a mow strip for some people. They connect that that's the term. That is a special roadway condition that the Planning Commission imposed.
Okay. Other council questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
I'm a believer in the fact that there is a definite difference in residential from a commercial area, and as is mentioned before, this is kind of half and half, depending on what side of the street you're on. But it becomes, I really consider that to be, meaning that being Cahuilla, more of a residential street than a commercial street, even if there are multifamily on it. I think that it's about time that we come up with, draft, or create alternative means of dealing with not necessarily streets, but the separate, the right of way that is not driven on, be it sidewalk, be it open. I think what's happened over the years in Las Palmas is an example of an opportunity lost, where right now everybody seems to think they need to pave with the street right up to the fence. And so consequently, it's a big, wide asphalt street where you can't tell where the street stops and where the private property stops, and not that that's all bad, but the opportunity to soften that neighborhood from a streetscape standpoint is lost. And I think there should be the potential, or at least have a set of city standards that would allow something a little bit different, that could be reflective of what the neighborhood would like it to be reflective of. In the case of the tennis club area, I don't think it is too late, as perhaps it might be in Las Palmas. And I think we're looking at an opportunity to deal with that. Whether or not DG is the right product, whether or not pavers like we use in the downtown would be a better product. I think there should be a look at alternatives that could be dealt with all through this area and give people options as they improve their property to eventually create a cohesive, be it a boundary, if nothing else, but just something to identify a different look to a specific area. And I don't think what the Planning Commission approved is wrong or bad. I think it's kind of partially there, and they're kind of looking more at a traditional way of solving a problem. I think, as Mr. Evans mentioned, there are other materials, as mentioned, some of the speakers mentioned, there are other materials, there are other ways of doing things, and I think this might be an opportunity for us to take a look at it and see what we can come up with. And it sounds to me like the Estrella is willing to go back and take a look at alternatives, which would not only satisfy their needs, but the neighborhood, and I think we should take advantage of it. So.
Okay. Other council questions or comments? I got a couple here. Maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, but I saw this whole thing unfold recently, and I saw this as an incredible opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity to define that which we have in Palm Springs that other cities don't have, and that is, as Mr. Oden said, distinctive neighborhood characteristics and qualities. And in order to protect and preserve that, we have to take steps, make exceptions, if you will, in defining what each neighborhood is. Some neighborhoods have perhaps lost it or have lost opportunities. Others still have it and have to figure out how to preserve it and define it. I'm going to state a couple things. I don't see gray concrete in pretty much any form being the solution on Cahuilla. Now, I'm okay with the parallel parking on Bellardo. Bellardo is a very different street than Cahuilla, very different. It is essential to the movement in and around the downtown. If you try to change or modify Bellardo, my fear is that people can't move freely on Bellardo. Well, they'll move one block west into Cahuilla, and you'll start getting more traffic in that area than you want. So you better make sure Bellardo remains functionally capable of carrying some degree of traffic load. Otherwise, the diversion will invade you more than you got a problem now. I would avoid the standard. I would avoid the ordinary. I think it's a great opportunity because of Mr. Jackson's comments earlier as the owner's rep that there is a willingness to try to figure this solution out. But I got a question. We refer to this as a historic district, Mr. Evans, as a district. Is this officially designated, defined by boundary, defined by criteria as a district in an official capacity?
Under the Historic Site Preservation Ordinance, it's not officially designated as a historic district. There is language in the general plan in reference to the historic tennis club area. It's more of a qualitative description. And then the policies of the general plan are interpretable, that you could say, in areas like this, yes, the idea is to have special street sections, and we've been using those policies for years in these neighborhoods.
Good.
But technically, is it a designated historic district under strict rules of historic preservation? No.
Well, then what I would like is that this become defined formally through historic site preservation, through the Planning Commission, eventually through us, that it is now defined as a geographic boundary, and these are the characteristics that we hold near and dear, okay, that we must preserve. I think that's a kind of a first step because it's more defining what we got now. The general plan is a big, broad umbrella, and you get a little bit of wiggle room in it, but sometimes you wiggle too far to one side and you're outside where you want to be. So let's see if we can't get cooperation from the neighborhood to define us, the historic site that district a little better. There's a couple of things I'd like you to look at, and although they're not on point here, I'd like to know what the district, once defined, wants to do with regards to its street sections, its sidewalks, its separators between sidewalks, landscape. How do you want to define that? I don't suggest that we tell you it's an 8-inch concrete grade. How do you want to do it? I'd like a little creativity because I want it to be preserved as an individual neighborhood. Then what I'd like to know is how do you want to further it from the standpoint of you got a lighting issue, which you all know your light fixtures are shot. We're trying to figure out what to do with them. They can't just remain there because they're beginning to look kind of broken. And I think that plays poorly. So how do you want to deal with that? Let's get through that. And then we go through streets and street signs and intersection developments, and that's a later phase. But what I want to know is, Mr. Evans, although I did not want this exhibit earlier, can you pull up the diagonal parking, please, on the Bellardo side? And what I want to know is how much of the diagonal parking is on the property and how much of it is in the right-of-way? Get your mic.
I've got to get my scale first.
Let me try to discuss with the audience while Doug does this. If you look at the current plan that we saw before with the edge of the pavement and then 13 feet of hard surface before you get to the bay parking, now we're looking at 20 foot of bay parking plus 13 plus the street. From my standpoint, it goes back to Mr. Mills' comments that now all of a sudden there's all this hard surface, all this asphalt. So what I want to know, is there an ability for the parking to be pulled, if you will, as indicated by this drawing on Bellardo? Can it be pulled off the property so we minimize the amount of hard surface? You don't have that additional 13 feet of hard surface that we don't know what to do with. And by moving that into the street closer, again, maintaining the right-of-way, the half-street, can we then get some of the sidewalk to move on to the other side of the parking and then allow for some of the tree articulation to go between the parking so that it's, example, 5 stalls and then a tree pop out, then 5 stalls and a tree pop out. So the trees move out to the street, getting more of the umbrella effect on your streets, reducing your hardscape, and moving your sidewalks to where it serves not the interface between the car and the street, as we traditionally do, because you see it, it's street, then sidewalk, then property, kind of juxtaposition the two. But I think in the sketch here, the diagonal parking is not on private property, it's on street, is that not right? It's on city property?
That is correct.
So can that model be somehow translated onto the Cahuilla side, thereby affording more land for landscape, softer scape, more aesthetically pleasing treatments, and we'll deal with how the parallel park, the bay parking gets defined. Again, not just an asphalt solution. Because I think you could probably get more parking in count, more landscaping in count, and less hard surface, is how I'm trying to look at this.
The part of the challenge to that, the simple answer is yes. It's expensive. The challenge of that is the historic decision in the 60s, I believe, to require that this street be widened to the master plan width, the bay parking be put back at the master plan width. So in theory, if we were going to come up and just do bay parking in the right-of-way right behind the edge of pavement, which would be up in here, you could do it in here either as 90-degree or diagonal. The challenge that we have is roughly from here to here, this bay parking exists at this location. So you'd have to pull it out if you wanted to match it all up, you know, and basically reconstruct this part, or pull this portion up and have it closer to the edge of pavement, and then have this fall back like it does today, where you've got that big, deep recess section. So we have, you know, kind of the old history, the 60s history, and then, you know, how do you make all that fit? And what I think the Estrella has tried to do with this bay parking is to start matching up with some existing improvement lines so that they don't have to rip out and reconstruct. If we were creative on how we do that, and we sat back down and took a look at it, well, we could look at the cost differences and bring that back. But, you know, every time we've met with the Estrella, they're obviously worried that to be too exotic or creative could also be very expensive, and they might not be able to put that in the budget.
Okay. Maybe the existing could become tandem parking.
Employees first and guests later.
Been done before.
I mean, in theory, you could have an unusual condition there and just try to work on it. You know, this is a real good example of the level of detail that we hash out at Development Committee with the staff, Design Review, Planning Commission, and you get this on an appeal. And if the council's pleasure is to give us direction and make us work a little bit harder to come up with, you know, maybe some options for you, we could certainly do that. You know, this is not just a planning issue, it's an engineering issue, it's a property owner issue, it's a neighborhood issue. And if the council would like to give us general direction on what you would like us to try to accomplish, we could come back with some options. And if you give us direction that you'd like to modify the position of the commission, we could do such in a resolution format for your next meeting and maybe come back with some options. I still think we'd have to go back and actually work on the details of the plan. One of the challenges the Estrella has had on this whole process is getting design professionals to be able to allocate enough time to do this in a timely fashion, and that's why it's taken as long as it has. People are just very, very busy, and they can't respond every 2 weeks in the design professions. In fact, Mr. Jackson has become not only a executive with the company, he also provides design services, and he's done a heck of a job.
Okay. Again, I'm okay with approving the Bellardo as submitted here with the parallel, but I would suggest that the Cahuilla gets sent back for restudy, and I would insist that the neighborhoods be clearly involved in that process. I mean, again, part of what they're defining.
I totally agree with that.
Is that a motion?
I can make that a motion.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion to approve the Bellardo side as submitted and to turn the Cahuilla back into the process again to be folded over one more time with neighborhood involvement and cooperation, and bring it back when it's ready. Is that a safe enough a motion? And I got a second by Mr. Ellis Spurgeon. Any further discussion or questions? Mr. Evan? Make sure you got it clear, sir, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I understand the motion. The question I would have is, would you like us to bring this back as a form of a resolution for your consideration at the next meeting, or would you like to direct staff and the city attorney to prepare the resolution based upon the discussion and submit it for the mayor's signature through the city clerk process? We've done both.
What's the council's pleasure? You want to approve the resolution, at least on the Bellardo side?
Yes.
Can we bifurcate it?
Yes.
Well, you could do it as a collective motion, and the question is, do you want a resolution at your next meeting for adoption, or do you want us to work with the city attorney to prepare a resolution for signatures?
What's the speediest way of doing it?
Direct us to prepare a resolution with the city attorney.
Let's do that.
And submit
Whatever's
it
the
back
fastest.
for signature.
Okay. Council okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Ross Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. And although it's still only 9 o'clock, I'm going to request a slight recess at this time just for a quick break. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. We're back in session. It's 9:07, 9:08. We'll reconvene the meeting. We'll go to item 13, the last of our public hearings. It's a tentative tract map number 31495, the Glorietta Investments at 1300 Amato Road. And I'll turn to Mr. Reddy for his staff report on this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a tentative tract map approval. Actually, it was approved 5-2 by the Planning Commission, and that was with 2 members absent, so actually it was 5-0. And with that, I'd ask Mr. Evans to give the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a project located on Amato Road. It's a project site that previously was subject to a very large apartment complex that the council recalls a very packed hearing. The chambers were full, the emotions were high, and tonight we bring you a very modestly designed 84-unit condominium project that I think most everybody is very comfortable with. The applicant has proposed a one-lot subdivision for condominium purposes for this particular project. I'll show you the map. The project would be 84 condominium units. They're 2-story units. The maximum height of the buildings is 30 feet because of the architectural roofs. The project, believe it or not, meets all zoning requirements, all setbacks, all parking. There's no variances, no relief. They basically did what is really pleasurable in our business. They defined the parameters and told the architects make it fit, which makes our work at staff level and the commission's work, council's work a lot easier. So tonight you're looking at a subdivision map for the property. I do have all the plans. I've given you the project background. It's an 8.86 acre site. It's a general plan for high density residential, 30 units maximum. It has a zoning designation that's equivalent and also a section 14 designation that's equivalent. They're coming in substantially below allowable density relative to what could be built on the property. And they've really just taken a look at a different type of building type as opposed to what we've seen before. With that, I'll show you the map, and if the council's pleasure, I will show you the plans that go with the map, but the plans are not subject to your meeting tonight.
Is that clear?
The subdivision map is shown in this particular exhibit. Basically shows you Amato Road, shows you Hermosa, basically a main entryway on Hermosa, a secondary emergency access point on Amato Road, basically a roadway configuration that goes around the perimeter. Each unit has individual garage amenities with a large open space amenity in the middle and some secondary amenities elsewhere. This is the map that's before the City Council tonight. Would the council like to look at the plans? Mr. Mayor, unless there's questions, that completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Council, questions on staff's report or questions on the exhibits before you? If not, I'd like to open the public hearing. This is a public hearing. This is item 13, tentative tract map 31495, the Glorietta Investments at 1300 Amato Road. Anyone wishing to address the council during this hearing, please come forward at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Dennis Freeman.
Dennis, would you pull that mic a little closer, please?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Dennis Freeman. I represent Amato Hermosa LLC. If you have any questions, I'm here. I have one question. I want to bring up and know if I can put a TV sign right out in the corner. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Dennis. We may call you later, but thank you very much for coming down. Anyone else wishing to address the council during this public hearing? Very good. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, we have one speaker, and we'll turn to council for questions, comments, or consideration. Anyone here wishing to address the TV issue? Is this building historic? Very good. Council, what's your pleasure here?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
I'll move the resolution.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Mills, and thank you, Mr. Oden. We have a motion by Mr. Mills and second by Mr. Oden. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Ms. Hodges, absent. Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Horace-Burgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. It's 4-0. It is deemed unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn now to council comments, announcements, or interagency reports. Council? Any comments you'd like to make at this time? No? Just one quick comment. At the CVA meeting this week, there was an excellent report on the number of increased carriers at the airport. We have increased significantly number of carriers, number of destinations, number of hubs, and by that it is facilitating movement on conventions. It was also reported at the CVA that the ASAE conference that was held in Hawaii generated 6 serious leads and 6 additional prospects. So we have 12 references coming out of it. I'm told that the dinner we hosted that night with the CVA and the Convention Center was the source of 5 of those. So it was a very successful endeavor. Hats off to the staff, the CVA. It was a wonderful representation at the exhibit hall, and of course that dinner. If we could go to every one of these things and bring back 6 and 6, almost 12 leads, it'd make it a lot easier. Mr. Dunn, again, I want to emphasize, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Fife were extraordinary in selling it, as was Mr. Bob Elsner, the representative from the Airport Commission and former ASE president. So the team is working. Congratulations. All right, at this time, any additional comments? Yes, good point. Thank you, Mr. Oden. The film festival did indeed open last night. The short film festival opened last night to a sellout crowd. Mr. Oden and I did attend. I was asked to say a few words on behalf of the council. We spoke of the incredible commitment, as emphasized by some public comments earlier. It was, I would suggest, a pretty interesting repertoire of films last night.
Oh, yeah.
Thought-provoking, safe statement, yeah? Diverse,
Definitely.
creative, and by all means entertaining. The pleasure of the film festival is that they are short, and they are quick in getting you engaged and then releasing you for the next one that follows. And I think we saw about 6 last night, 6, 7?
6 or 7.
Yeah. And I mean, they all have very different in theme and very different in their style. But
Some animated.
the animated one, Chub Chubs, which I'd seen last year, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
You saw it too. Actually, very well done. It's an absolute wonderful asset. If you get a chance, it runs for about another week. Go down to the Camelot. Really a delightful way to spend some time.
The collaboration between Dolly and
Disney.
Walt Disney was incredible.
Yeah.
That was absolutely incredible.
Merging the 2 images. It should be noted that next Thursday, the 25th, at the Riviera, they will be celebrating a restored, renovated, remodeled facility. And in celebration of the Rocktoberfest, which follows next weekend, they will have a special showing of the famous Palm Springs Weekend movie. Connie Stevens will be there. It is limited seating, first come, first serve. But it's part of our history, our culture. The Palm Springs Weekend movie from the 1963 era was indeed significant. It helped promote Palm Springs. I have brought a number of my pieces of my collection from the Palm Springs Weekend, including posters from Italy, from Belgium, from Mexico, records that are in Japanese, in Spanish, because the ramifications of this movie were international in its scale. It basically told the world of Palm Springs. And if you've not seen Palm Springs Weekend, take a chance, come on down. It's a remarkable piece of Palm Springs history, and it will be celebrated. And then following next weekend will be Rocktoberfest, which kicks off, I believe, Friday, doesn't it, Mr. Oden? I think it's Friday the 26th. So the events are beginning, the season's coming online. We'll start getting a lot of exposure and a lot of fun things going on in Palm Springs. So come out and join us, okay? Let's now turn to our legislative calendar. First item on the leg calendar is item 14. This again is a tentative track map 31328, known as Palm Springs Garden LP. It is located at 1050 East Baristo Road. And Mr. Reddy, I will turn to you for your staff report, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We did open the public hearing on this at our last meeting, and it's here tonight for action. I believe there wasn't a quorum for this particular one last time, and it's ready for your vote. If you would like another repeat of the staff report, Mr. Evans can supply you with that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Evans?
Mr. Mayor, very briefly, this is a one-lot subdivision for 68 condominium units at 1050 East Baristo Road. It's east of Avenida Caballeros, and right next to it, an existing condo project, Rose Gardens, on the south. Planning Commission did vote 6-1 to recommend approval of the tentative subdivision map, as well as took a separate action on the approval of the architectural approval application, which is final with the commission. The council at your last meeting had a debate, several motions on the floor relative to how to deal with this and ultimately continue the item. Questions that were raised had to do with the Architectural Practices Act, and we looked at that and did a little research and provided that information to council. The applicant has done the same. Probably, I'm not sure if you got a copy of it. He submitted the information to staff, but we can certainly talk to that, and the applicant could answer any questions. I think there were some concerns about the quality of the design of the project and just how it fits in the community, and that was debated at Design Review and Planning Commission through the review process. I'll certainly show you the plans if you would like, and I can also show you the one-lot subdivision map if you'd like. That completes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, the clerk did remind me that I did misspoke. I got this one confused with another measure. It's not that this was due for lack of quorum. It was another matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. There is no public hearing on this. I think we closed it last time. Council, what's your pleasure on this? This is back before you.
I will move the
questions?
resolution.
Second.
Motion for approval by Mr. Oden and a second by Mr. Mills. Is there any further comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It is 4-0. It's deemed unanimous. Item 15 is the municipal code amendment for curfew and truancy, first introduced on 9/3/03. This is for the second reading and adoption. What's the council's pleasure?
I'll move the ordinance.
That's my fault.
It is. Read the title, waive the text.
Thank you, Mr. Oden, and thank you, Ms. Ellis Spurgeon. Any further comments or questions? Madam Clerk, if you will, as instructed, read title waiving text.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
Don't you have to finish making the motion before the second happens?
It's probably procedurally accurate, but I think in this particular decorum, we're all right. We know that Mr. Oden would actually get to close if I hadn't actually slipped something into him sideways there. I'm sorry, Mr. Oden. My apologies, sir. You normally act so professional. Madam Clerk, if you will read title and waiving text, please.
This being ordinance of the City of Palm Springs, California, repealing sections 11.56.005, 10, 20, 30, 40, and adding sections 11.56005, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 45 of the Palm Springs Municipal Code regarding curfew and truancy.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. It is 4-0. It is deemed unanimous. Item 16 is the 2003-2004 allocated position and compensation plan. This is our fourth amendment for the office of the city clerk. Mr. Reddy?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, what's before you actually was brought to me by the city clerk. This is not any change in the dollar amounts to the general fund or these positions. It is actually a reflection of the titles in the field of the clerk and clerkdom these days. In the professional clerk's office, there are several titles that they are more referred to now, and that's what's represented before you. Again, there is no change to the financial side of the equation.
Can I get a spell check on the clerkdom?
The clerkdom.
Was that with a B?
Is that
or-
common spelling or?
I'll move the resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis Spurgeon, and a second by Mr. Mills. Thank you. Any additional comments or questions at this time? Thank you. I'll ask for a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Rose Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye, it's deemed 4-0. It is unanimous. Item 17 is a comprehensive fee schedule amendment for fuel flowage fees. Try saying that 3 times fast. Mr. Reddy?
Members of council, in an effort to keep those planes flying in and out, this is brought to you by the Director of Airports, and the report, basically, as you note, there's an increase of 10% to the fixed-based operators, which is a good thing, and Mr. Smoot can give you additional details if required.
No.
I'll move the resolution.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Mr. Smoot, 10% would represent how much additional revenue for the airport, roughly speaking?
Approximately $20,000.
$20,000. All right, sir, thank you very much. That's annual?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions? If not, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds Bergen?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye, 4-0, deemed unanimous. Item 18 is the City Facilities Janitorial Service. Mr. Reddy, your staff report, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, our janitorial service contract had expired. In timely manner, we went out for requests for proposals. What we did actually to assess those proposals, we had representatives from various departments and facilities around the city that are recipients of this service, and we had them assess the proposals, and their recommendation is before you this evening. I would note it is a change from our current provider. As a note to council, the new provider is obligated to offer the current provider's employees an opportunity to work with the new contract. And with that, we'd recommend its approval. Thank you.
I agree, greatly appreciate that last statement. All right, council, further questions, comments, or what consideration do you have at this item?
Move the minute.
Motion for approval by Mr. Mills. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Oden. Additional comments or questions? Again, the hiring of the existing staff members that are currently working, is that part of the contract, or is it a verbal understanding?
It's a state law.
State law, okay.
So you get first consideration.
Good, I would greatly appreciate that. The young ladies that at least clean our building have been with us for quite some time.
Yes.
Do an
very
excellent
good.
job. Excellent, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds Bergen?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye. 4-0 deemed unanimous. Item 19, an annual event here in Palm Springs, the Arenas Road Halloween Costume Party.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, your approval is recommended. This is an annual event in Palm Springs, the closing of Arenas Road, and ministerial acts require you to suspend certain ordinances. With that, we recommend your approval. Thank you.
Council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the minute order and resolution.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Oden, second by Ms. Rella Spurgeon. Any additional comments? Mr.
Mayor.
Mills?
Just, I'm curious if the affected business orders are supportive of this overall? I mean, I'm asking a question simply.
Yes, they are, but Mr. Mills and for the members of council, I would ask Scott Mikesell to come to the microphone, and he can give you actually a good detail of the support for this and the process in which that support was gained.
Good evening, Scott.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council. The short answer is yes. They are all on board and have been for many years, as well as the surrounding neighborhood. It's quite an exciting event, and to my knowledge, we've never received any complaints, with respect to this. It's actually a lot of fun. Very entertaining, too.
Yeah, I believe it to be one that's embraced not only by the businesses, but actually the neighborhood themselves. They engage in the festivities.
Correct.
It's very well done. Excellent. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Oden, second by Ms. Rella Spurgeon. Any additional comments? I assume the motion is for the minute order and the resolution?
Yes.
Concurrence, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is 4-0. It is deemed unanimous. Let's turn now our attention to item 20. This is a Desert Healthcare District. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Mayor, I will be abstaining for business purposes.
Thank you, sir. We'll allow you to leave chamber before we open staff report. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Your staff report on item 20, which is the Desert Healthcare District.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's certainly not often that cities get parks handed to them on a silver platter, but in fact, this is what the matter before you is, a park being handed to us by the Desert Healthcare District. Actually, it's a parcel they acquired adjacent to Ruth Hardy Park. They decided that they wanted to make it into a park that had a healing hospital theme to it, a park nonetheless. And Mr. Evans will show you the diagrams and the pictures of the park if they've been put up.
I believe they're not up. We saw them in an earlier session. Council, do you need to see it? Doug, I think it's all right.
It's all right, Doug.
I think it's all right. The exhibit was basically showing the conceptual landscaping piece on this.
And with that, members of council, it's recommended that we accept this gift, and I believe the construction schedule will take place as soon as we have our approval, and in short order, we will have a new park in the city of Palm Springs. Thank you.
Very good.
I gratefully will make the motion to approve the minute order.
Now, and I will second it.
Got a motion by Ms. Rutherford Spurgeon, a second by Mr. Oden, for an expansion to Ruth Hardy Park.
Yes.
And our hats off to the Desert Healthcare District for their generosity and cooperation in allowing us to expand our facility and preserve that open space. I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mr. Mills, absent. Mr. Oden?
Aye.
Ms. Wallace Spurgeon?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor?
Aye, it's 3-0. It's deemed unanimous. If you could bring Mr. Mills back in, we can close perhaps the meeting. At this time, are there any additional legislative items before us, Mr. Reddy?
There are none, sir.
Thank you, sir. Are there any added starters?
There are none.
Under the area of reports and requests, council reports or requests?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have a request.
Sir.
Last week, Mr. Ogren made a presentation on what was taking place in the downtown. It's been a while since we've actually it's been almost 10 years since we did our major renovation in the downtown corridor. I would like for Mr. Ogburn to bring a plan to us, at least a 5-year plan of how he sees the development, a developmental plan of the downtown area. We've not had anything like that in a while.
Very good. Other council reports or requests?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mills.
Request-wise, and we talked about it on the Estrella item. I would like to see us seriously look at developing engineering standards, standard drawings, standard sections for neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods, or however it gets, however it's deemed. But I think, as we discussed, that not every situation fits the mold, and that we have an opportunity here to create, establish, and give alternatives to neighborhoods, define neighborhoods, and keep that neighborhood character, or as well as perhaps even enhance it. In my mind, it's going to take an established engineering practice that solves the problems of water flow and street maintenance and all those type of things. But there are certainly ways of doing that. It's been done other places, and I'd like to see us move towards creating those standards. One item. And then also, I appreciated the report on the Architectural Practices Act that we received with a prior item. My thought is that at this point, it seems to me that it's certainly logical to require that projects be submitted, projects that are submitted be prepared under the observation of a registered architect or building designer, whatever the case may be, and that we pursue making that part of our requirements, whether, I don't know if it's done by ordinance or policy or what, but I think it's something we've talked about for years and years, and I really think it will tend to improve the quality of projects at the submittal basis, or at the submittal portion. At least that's my hope that it will. Then also just a brief report. God, you'd think I was running for office. Just a brief report that The, the,
At this rate, it might be your time.
that the building task force met last week, kind of a review meeting, and that the task force is still in existence. We are forming a field trip to go look at a matrix system. Mr. Reddy is working on that, and hopefully have a report back to council on that request in the future. And that committee has gone into another subcommittee for reviewing zoning ordinance, of which I volunteered for, and several other people. And so that we'll be coming back in a report at a later date as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions? Any other reports or requests? And item 22 is the Treasurer's Investment Report as of July 30th. Any comments or questions on that? Otherwise, it's a receive and file. And then item 23 is direction concerning board and commission vacancies. You have 3 boards with vacancies. Although we haven't got enough applicants for the first one, we do have enough to fill the remaining 2. What would be the council's pleasure?
Well, we can make the one appointment.
Yes, you can, and I do need to know which position you're going to be filling. I have 2 commissioners whose terms have expired, the chairman, Hal Ball, and board member Don DeVore.
We don't have, oh, they're in the, okay.
Are they both equal in term, in time?
Yes, they both have expired now, or
They'd
are
both be
expired.
full terms.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and you have 1 applicant, I think, at this time for the appeals board?
That is correct.
That's Craig Griffith.
Have the incumbents termed out, or just not applied?
They are not, yeah, they're termed, I'm sorry, they're termed out.
Termed out. Okay, thank you. All right, council, what's your pleasure? You've got 1 applicant for the administrative appeals.
Yes.
Second.
Yes. I nominate Mr. Craig Griffith.
That's what I need to hear. I need a nomination. Acknowledgement of 1 applicant is appreciated, but I need to know if you're going to nominate him.
Yes, he's nominated.
Nominated by Mr. Oden. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ellis Spurgeon. All those in favor of appointing Mr. Craig Griffith for Administrative Appeals Board, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It's 4-0, deemed unanimous. In the area of the Airport Commission, you have 1 term.
Mr. Mayor, I need to know which position, are you replacing the chairman position or the board member position?
Is the chairman not selected by the body?
Yes. I would,
Yes, but he's currently serving as the chair right now. The body selects a chairman, yes, but
So if you place Mr. Griffith in Don DeVore's place, you still have an active board, fully staffed, and will then seek a replacement for the chair.
yeah, yes.
okay.
All right, is that the council's concurrence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. In the Airport Commission, you have a number of applicants before you, many of which have been before us in the past. Do you
Mr.
remember?
Yes.
Mr. Oden.
I'd like to nominate Howard Jack Packer. Mr. Packer has attended, in the past year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the majority of the board meetings. And while I know the last time someone was appointed who had a lot of stellar credentials, but I think it's important that the everyday citizen who is willing to put forth that much effort, that they have an opportunity to participate in their local government.
I'll second that.
Motion to approve Howard Jack Packer, name and nomination. Are there other names you'd like to add in nomination? Based on my review of the applicants in the prior interview process, I'd also like to place A.D. Kessler in nomination based on his extensive experience and qualifications. We can then vote on them accordingly. Do I need a motion to place someone in nomination? Procedurally, where are we on that? This is still something we're sort of establishing.
I don't think you.
Well, yeah, they have one motion for Howard Packer.
That's your
and they need a
nomination.
motion for your second one. You need to either, if you want.
There's only one, your mic's not on. There's only one airport commission opening, and I'm suggesting a second name to be considered for nomination.
Right, so you would need a second for yours to vote on.
And again, I make a motion for Kessler, if I can get a second. If not, that will fail for lack of second. Is that a second by?
Yes.
Mr. Mills? Thank you. All right, we've got Mr. Kessler and Mr. Packer. Okay, are there any other nominations at this time? I'll accept a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Motion to close by Mr. Oden. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mills. Nominations are now closed. You've got Kessler and you've got Packer. Let's put forward Mr. Packer's name for consideration. All those in favor of Mr. Packer for this appointment, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll stand opposed to that, and I guess there's no need on voting Mr. Kessler then. So it appears as though Mr. Packer then is your airport commissioner. Okay? Under Parks and Recreation, we have one applicant that is afforded review tonight.
Yes, Mr. Charles J. Ciali,
Sir?
and I would like to nominate him for the position.
You can nominate, so I guess that's what we're going to go with. Mr. Charles Ciali is nominated. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mills. Any further nominations at this time? Take a motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Mr. Roden, is there a second to close? Closed by Mr. Mills. All those in favor of closing nominations say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor of the nomination of Mr. Ciali say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 4-0. We have made the appointments. We still need a representative, though, for the Administrative Appeals Board. I would suggest we continue to advertise that in whatever fashion you deem fit, Madam Clerk. Let's now turn to public reports or requests. Anyone wishing to address council, please come forward at this time. Mr. Reddy, do you have any staff reports or requests, sir?
Just one note to City Council. On the 25th, there was scheduled a joint City Council, Tribal Council meeting. At the request of the Tribal Council, that meeting has been postponed. The new date that they're suggesting is December the 4th. That meeting would be at 5 p.m. at the Convention Center. I would note that that evening also is a Marine Band concert at 7 p.m. We thought that it might be okay to have the meeting at 5. It certainly will not take more than 2 hours, and then both councils could go into the concert if so desired.
I might suggest the following, based on what we've had in the past. We did host a meeting dealing with transportation issues when the collapse of the state occurred about a year ago. We hosted about a 20-member representative meeting in the same room we have dinner while the band was rehearsing in the main hall, and the noise was, at best, annoying because it was not the intent of the meeting. When it's the intent of the gathering to hear the music, it's delightful. When you're trying to get work done, it is disruptive. Even though the concert is scheduled after our meeting, there may be rehearsals scheduled at that time. I might suggest we seek alternate venue or date. If the date's okay, that's fine, but I just suggest to you that there's a problem because they do rehearse, and it is quite loud, as you would hope when you're in the concert, mind you. So perhaps we can find an alternate venue, whether we go to the spa and sort of reverse the order, or we find something else.
The clerk informs me that December 11th was also open to the tribe. They prefer the 4th, but they did offer the 11th as well.
The 11th is the night of the Historic Inn Christmas Walk, I believe. So if we can do the 4th and just change venue, is it scheduled for 5?
5 p.m.
Well, maybe we can move it till we get to the new ballroom where we held the board and commission dinner, so it's at least that much further away. Because again, the proximity will be a factor. I'll put down 5th, council 5th, and time for dinner?
4th.
And that's the same night as the concert? Right?
That is correct.
And the time for the dinner is?
5 p.m.
5. Good, okay. All right. Anything else? Otherwise, our next regular meeting is scheduled for October 1st at 7 p.m. We have a study session scheduled at September 24th, again at 7 p.m. Both are preceded by closed session at 5:30, and our joint meeting has been rescheduled to December 4th, 5 p.m. at the Convention Center. Okay? Seeing no further business before the council, it is now 9:43. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you, and good night.